diaspora actually played a significant role to some extent. The diaspora, in terms of feeding back information about what's the world's reaction to events in Iran. Again, that has been a factor. As I said, I see two oppositions. And you can look at that distinction that I have made and sort of look at it as a weakness or a calculation. A weakness in the sense that the supreme leader, who arguably is still the most powerful player in Iran, thinks he doesn't have the powers to go after people like Rafsanjani. That's a weakness. Or it's a calculation. He could go after Rafsanjani. He doesn't want to. Again, that would be if we knew the answer to that would be a very significant breakthrough, but we really don't. But the fact is, there is that distinction. I don't see any reason why someone like Hashemi Rafsanjani should not be in the same personal situation as Mir Hossein Mousavi. I mean, if you listen what Rafsanjani says, pretty much saying, if the people don't want the supreme leader, he should go. Why is that any different from what Mir Hossein Mousavi has been saying? So why is there a distinction? Why do we have two oppositions? So, yeah, I've already hinted at Khomeini has to go. Khamenei has to go to Khamenei has to listen. This is the latest. This is what we're hearing, particularly since December of 2009, where the latest bloody crackdown took place. Why is the slogan changing? At least when you look at the statements of the leading reformist figures. My feeling is that, let me go to the next slide before I say that. My feeling is that the opposition also looks at the regime in largely two entities, the pro-Ahmadinejad, the pro-Khamenei. They have now realized 7 months into this crisis, they don't have the muscle, the strength, the capacity to mobilize and overwhelm the entire regime in its entirety, if that makes sense. What they want to go is to create this split. And now they're saying, the supreme leader, we're committed to you, we're committed to the Constitution, but give us, obviously this tacit understanding would be, give us the leeway to go after Ahmadinejad within the framework of the Islamic Republic. So this is out of, I guess, weakness. This is not because they feel Khamenei is the best option available to them, but 7 months into it, this is all they probably could get away with. But the reality is also, if you look at the ideology of people like Ahmadinejad, and you look at the history of the supreme leader, last 20 years while he's been supreme leader, but also if you look back at the man's entire career, on foreign policy, ideology, and so forth, also economic policy, there are certain similarities that he has with Ahmadinejad that he doesn't share, obviously, with the opposition. Okay, let me, because I know I got about 2 minutes, and just really some thoughts. And by the way, if anybody wanted the slides here, I know I've written way too much here for a PowerPoint presentation, apologies, but anybody wants the slides, please let me know, or Kate, and I'll pass it on. But final thought I wanted to sort of share with you is this issue of what would Khamenei do? I mean, obviously this is not Iraq, this is not some totalitarian setup where one individual has total power and can single-handedly decide the outcome of this crisis. That's not the case. He's been influenced and shaped by events around him. I'm sure a lot of people are speaking to him in his ear, trying to convince him to go either this way or the other. But what are Khamenei's options right now? I think, again, my guess is he is looking at the popular mobilization that has surprised him. But what got him to support Ahmadinejad the way he did in 2005, 2009, that main issue remains intact, which is his inherent suspicion about the ultimate objectives of the opposition, which is the reform of the Constitution, reducing the powers of the supreme leader. That hasn't changed. He knows that. And he knows even if the opposition are out there today and saying, please, Mr. Supreme Leader, instead of backing Ahmadinejad, can you just be neutral about it? He knows they're saying it out of almost a sense of desperation, it seems, as opposed to having changed their political minds. But at the same time, he knows Ahmadinejad has been an individual who's amassed an impressive number of enemies in the first administration. He's got enemies across the spectrum, you know, politically speaking, in the clergy, in the economic class, and so forth. So I guess to some extent, we can look at the next few months, maybe a year or so. There are some significant factors here that might shape it. The nuclear issue is significant. The idea of more sanctions on Iran. I think nobody is really seriously talking about military strikes against Iran state, so that's not a factor. But sanctions could potentially become a factor. So Khamenei is going to look back there and look at the performance of the Ahmadinejad government, and unless they can contain the opposition the way they seem to have managed, at least since the last set of protests in December, if the regime can stay intact that way, then I think he will give Ahmadinejad a chance to carry on. But I also think he's a force, he's an individual, his principlist faction, or people he would be more than happy to trade with the opposition if that's what he has to do to keep the regime intact. We have these protests coming up on the 11th of February, promised protests. Let's see how significant they're going to be. If they're going to be anything like what they had in December, that's going to tell us quite a bit about the momentum in the opposition movement, at least on the grassroots level. But we are definitely seeing a change of tone among the senior opposition figures, from going to saying, Supreme Leader, maybe it's time for you to go, to saying, Supreme Leader, please step aside so we can deal with Ahmadinejad in the parliament, within the framework of the Islamic Republic, which, you know, has another significant point to it in itself, which is the opposition today is committed, by and large, the leadership of it, to the idea of the Islamic Republic, which is not what most of the young supporters in the streets are committed to. They want to, there's no doubt in my mind, they want the entire regime to change, but they don't have the tools at their disposal to do anything to bring that about. And I think as a result, the opposition, even though they know they're not the kind of opposition leaders they would want, is what they have, and that's what they're going to stick with. And I think with that, I'll leave it to Ali to tell us a bit about the nightmare scenarios of, you know, bloody upheavals that have to be contained and so forth. So thanks very much for listening.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very, very much for your kind invitation, and thank you for providing me with this opportunity to share my analysis with you. Approximately 31 years ago, when Grand Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini returned to Iran from his exile in Paris, the first place in Tehran he held a speech was the Behesht Zahra Cemetery. In Behesht Zahra Cemetery, Grand Ayatollah Khomeini held a very, very important speech in which he said, every generation in Iran should have the right to be the master of its own destiny. Grand Ayatollah Khomeini said, maybe our fathers wanted a monarchy. Maybe our grandparents wanted a monarchy. We want something else. Now, the opposition movement in Iran today is quoting the late Grand Ayatollah Khomeini. They say every generation in the history of Iran should have the right to be the master of its own destiny. Maybe our parents were active and engaged in a revolution which led to the collapse of the imperial regime and to the creation of the Islamic Republic. We want something else. They are quoting nobody else but the founder of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Now, the opposition both inside Iran and outside Iran has been greatly energized.